Hello. 1 year ago, I stood before you, my friends, old and new, introducing the first vigil for the missing at Stanford University. There, I spoke about the incredible tragedies befalling Latin American immigrants. And equally, I spoke about the remarkable resilience of the families of the dead and disappeared along the US-Mexico border. I did so with great expectations to build community, to uplift voices, for all of us to grow in our knowledge of this crisis, so that together we could make change. And now I speak to you at a distance, confronted by the reality of a world in flux, standing at the intersection of many different and critical roads, still in the midst of this COVID pandemic. While we grapple with these immediate concerns, we must not lose sight that there still exists at home another epidemic, one that quarantines have not yet curbed. We remain still, this year like last, at the crossroads of freedom and detention, asylum and deportation, and like with the COVID pandemic, life and death. So today more than ever, we must come together to push back as a unified force against the old pathways that devalue and degrade, that marginalize and oppress, that impose both physical and emotional harm on those among us who are the most vulnerable. The new American normal has become a common phrase in pandemic discourse. Let us seize upon this here. Let us gather the strength together to demand a new normal, a changed normal, in order to heal our border policies and look to a new border vision, one that preserves individual dignity, welcomes diversity, and ensures that all immigrants can find refuge safely among us as our friends, our neighbors, our colleagues, and our families. My name is Dr. Bridget Algee-Hewitt, and today I stand with you in solidarity with the undocumented and the displaced, the mothers, the fathers, the sons, the daughters. I stand with you for all who seek refuge in the United States only to find themselves among the missing, disappeared in the shadows on account of our current immigration policies. Sadly, we also stand together in honor of those thousands of forced migrants who have perished while making the treacherous journey northwards through the deserts, the jungles, and the urban spaces of Latin America in order to cross the borders of Mexico and the United States. Finally, I stand with you in support of the families and friends of those disappeared who grieve the loss of a loved one and suffer through the lack of closure as they wait for the remains to be found, identified, repatriated, and only then laid to rest. It's this last stage that I, as a forensic anthropologist, work with my colleagues to represent the dead, those who cannot otherwise be heard, as the voice of the forcibly silenced and as the last line of communication between the living and the deceased. What I've learned from these experiences is sobering. As borders are tightened, more people are harmed. As physical and legal barriers are instituted, more people are driven to cross in increasingly remote, dangerous locations or risk safety at the mercy of coyotes and cartels. When more wall is erected, more people die. The significance of this crisis then is tremendous. The responsibility of doing right by the dead, of serving social justice, and bringing some closure to grieving families weighs heavy. We should also feel the weight of the importance of elevating the rights of the living. Together, we can build a community that shoulders these weights, that prioritizes the reclamation of power and agency. The forcibly displaced show their strength of character, their courage and fortitude every day as they overcome circumstances we can only imagine. Yet, as refugees, they are among us the most structurally vulnerable members of our society. They are parents and children, the young and the old, immigrating alone and in families. They're the people who were pushed to abandon all that was familiar and risk death for the hope of a new life in a foreign country. These persons do not just disappear. They are forcibly disappeared through systems of structural, emotional, and physical violence. Inequality, poverty, racism, gangs, politics, civil unrest all do harm, threaten futures, motivate whole families to immigrate as refugees, seeking only the basic human rights of security and safety. For thousands, we know that this journey ends in death in the borderlands. For just as many others, their story is unknown. They are the missing. They are the ones who will never be found. These realities may seem far removed from our own communities, yet the evidence of immigrant dehumanization is abundant. It's just blatant around us, from detention centers to the exploitation of undocumented workers. It lies very close to my home, and I assure you it lies very close to yours. Together, however, we can push back. While it's not everyone's role to be a public advocate or an activist working the front lines of the crisis, it is possible for everyone. And I would argue it's incumbent upon everyone to make change. As a practical and doable start, we can initiate this change by building a compassionate and concerned community of well-informed stakeholders who can educate the public and ensure that factual information about the crisis is disseminated. When we change minds through education, we change what we as a society are willing to accept. This change is long past due. Now is the time to not accept, but to actively reject, to demand no more deaths, to demand no more disappearances. With this said, I'm deeply inspired by your attendance at this vigil today. It marks this first step in this community building. I know we can learn so much from each other. And I ask you to embrace the educational goal and to share this information widely. I'm ever grateful for your support as we remember today the disappeared, both the living and the dead. I'm also deeply encouraged that we can find a solution to prevent future missing tomorrow, to prevent missing always. Thank you.